Happy New Year. Let's start over. Welcome to the fourth installment of Balades Parisiennes that my brother will be giving to you today about the
Hi, everybody.
Rue Montorgueil and its alentour and the surroundings of the Rue Montorgueil. You are automatically on mute. If you will, please stay on mute. If you have a question during the presentation, you have two options. You can put your question in the chat. I'll be looking at the chat as we move along through the presentation, or you can wait until the end and there will be time for questions at the end. Okay, people are arriving. Let me let them in. And also I am recording this presentation. So if anybody would like to have the presentation after the fact, it will be available and we will put it on our YouTube channel where the other three are already available. Et voila. Otherwise, I will let my brother start the presentation, and it should run about 60 minutes this time.
Yes, I promise.
I'm going to get it a little bit shorter than
this time around. I won't get caught up in my own explanations. So hi, everybody. I'm thrilled to be back with you for the fourth installment of Balades Parisiennes. We are going to explore the quartier Montorgueil, and the concept of today's presentation are pedestrian areas. So I'll talk about pedestrian areas and we'll talk about the quartier Montorgueil, and we'll kind of blend everything together in a fun balade together. So let me, as usual, well, you know who I am, So let's just take a look at where we are in Paris. So the first time we did Montmartre, and we were way in the north. The second time we were way in the south in the fifth. Then we were in the eastern part of the city at the Butte Chaumont, and now we are really front and center in Paris. So the quartier around Les Halles, le Louvre, and south of Le Sentier and the Grand Boulevard. So really a central part of the city. And for the first time, this is an area where I've never personally lived in. So I don't have the experience of a resident of the neighborhood, but I've spent a lot of time in this neighborhood. So I have more of a visitor's point of view, but I spent a lot of time, and it was really at one point the place where I would meet up with all of my friends, and I've had many good times in this neighborhood. So we're going to do something a little shorter this time. Like last time around was long and probably a little exhausting for everybody. So we're just going to keep it simple. 5 stops. We're going to start with La Collection Pinault, and I'll tell you a little more about that. Then we're going to visit l'Église Saint-Eustache. Then we're going to really focus on La Rue Montorgueil and kind of like discover a few places and some restaurants and some places where you can shop. Then we're going to do the Passage du Grand Cerf, which is like a shopping arcade in Paris. And then we will finish with La Rue Réaumur and some of the architectural highlights of that city. So not much shorter than last time, and more focused on places where you can eat, places where you can shop. Fewer indications on monuments, but so that it's a little more breezy and pleasant. So I wanted to, I was interested in kind of talking to you about pedestrian areas, pedestrian streets in Paris. So did you know? So Paris is a city where people walk a lot. And as of 2021, it represents about 50% of all movements. So like of all people moving in Paris, 50% of that is done by foot. And the rest is either done through the public transportation, the metro and the buses, and an even smaller percentage of that is done with cars. Paris has become extremely difficult. It has always been challenging for drivers, but with the current mayor and the current policy in the city, it's really to reduce the presence of cars in the city, to reduce the pollution, and really put forward public transportation and opportunities to walk. So pedestrian streets and areas have always been like a huge part of the city. And because of what they represent, they are always places where you find the most shops, the most cafes, the most restaurants. So really, if you want to find a busy, a bustling, an interesting, and a typically Parisian area in Paris, looking for a pedestrian area is usually the right move. So I'm just going to kind of show you a few pedestrian area streets in Paris, just to show that they're like very different. They're not all the same. And most of them are usually very typical of Parisian life. So here I'm going to focus on the Rue Montorgueil, which is, I've qualified it, I've characterized it as the trendiest. And I think it is. It was one of the first areas which really had kind of like this, a specific personality. And so just a little map just to show you that even though Paris is a fairly big city, all the green areas and the orange dots represent pedestrian streets and areas. So you can see that there are, so of course there are like a lot of streets with where cars can drive, but you can see a lot of areas, and all of these orange dots represent areas where you have stores, you have restaurants, you have cafes, and where people gather together and live the typical Parisian life. So let's look at a few other ones. So one of the first, and that's, I've put it there because we've been down that street during our first presentation, La Rue Saint-Rustique. So it's way up near the Sacré-Cœur, and that's one of the first pedestrian areas in Paris. The most medieval, so that's La Rue des Barres in the fourth quarter of Paris. So, of course, most of the pedestrian areas are ancient medieval cities and are the symbols of the history of Paris, the past life of Paris, and the Rue des Barres is extremely medieval in its architecture and its details, but they're not all picturesque and tourist oriented. Some of them are just basically places where people go to shop and go to do their everyday activities, like the Rue de Lévis, which is in the 17e, where here you have people doing their marché. We talked about open markets. In many ways, even though pedestrian areas are not open markets because they're open all the time, they really have a very similar atmosphere because the stores are there and people can walk close to the stores and look at the food and look at the produce. So it's a similar type of atmosphere for the shoppers and for the Parisians who are walking along the pedestrian area. So the Rue de Lévis is I know it well because I have a lot of friends who live in the 17th. So it's really like the place where you have to go shopping. That's where you go and buy your meat, your vegetables, and everything is concentrated in one area. I don't know the Rue Daguerre because the 14th arrondissement is just so far away from the 18th that I never go there, but I know the Rue Daguerre is a very famous place for shops and living areas. So here you have the most famous one, the Rue des Rosiers, which is in the first Jewish quarter of Paris, and it's a very small street, also with a strong medieval feel. Here it's more. So there's another characteristic of the pedestrian areas. They're also often very touristy. A lot of tourists gather there because there's a lot of restaurants, a lot of fun places to visit. So La Rue des Rosiers, there's a lot of stores. We saw the Rue Mouffetard in our second presentation, and there you have a lot of students, a lot of tourists, a lot of cheap restaurants where you can kind of take something on the go, and La Rue Centrale des Arts, which is in the middle of the six in the student quarter. So a lot of students gather there. So very different personalities, but they all have the common denominator of being pedestrian areas. And really, just to highlight that these areas really are the heart, the core, one of the characteristics of Paris. So we've already gone there. Okay, so now we're going to start with the first stop, obviously. So it's La Collection Pinault. So La Collection Pinault, I don't know if you know who François Pinault is. You probably know him by the fact that he is Salma Hayek's husband. So the actress Salma Hayek, she has a husband who is very rich, called François Pinault, and he's one of the richest men in France. And he and his father, and I think his father who put the collection together, had one of the most famous and forward-looking art collection in Europe, in the world. And he wanted to find a place where he could show it to the public. So after many tribulations, I won't go into details, the Bourse du Commerce was chosen to be the place that would host the collection. So what is la Bourse du Commerce? The Bourse du Commerce is a building that was built in the 19th century as really the center of all business activities in Paris. If you wanted to start a business, you had to go to the Bourse du Commerce to register. If you wanted to find information, if you needed any type of document, any type of connection, if you needed to find another business, you went to the Bourse du Commerce. Of course, with changing trends, the fact that most companies moved to other areas of Paris and sometimes outside of Paris, very quickly the Bourse du Commerce stopped being this a center for French business. So it became more this building that didn't really have any purpose, that was in need of a new destiny, of a new goal, of a new project. So they decided, so the mayor of Paris gave I would say, maybe gave a license to François Pinault to renovate the building and open a museum that would host his famous collection. So it's called La Collection Pinault. It opened in 2021, and it's probably one of the most beautiful architectural creations or projects of the last few years in Paris. First of all, like the architect Tadao Ando, who is one of the most famous architects in the world, was in charge of the renovation. So he did not build, and nothing was destroyed. Everything was just renovated, highlighted, enhanced. And you'll see the inside. It's very much like a 19th century building, but just so beautiful. And it really, and it hosts some of the most works from some of the most famous, world-renowned contemporary artists. So I will tell you right away, I'm not an expert in art, so we can all have different appreciations. Some of the art there is a little far out. It's a little odd, but it's definitely worth visiting because it's a one in a kind experience. And I really wanted to share that with you. So here are pictures of the building itself. It's a gorgeous building. So of course you can see that really maybe what characterizes the building the most is the fact that it's round. And it's really, I think, one of the few buildings in Paris that has that really circular, round architecture. And that was something that was very popular in the 19th century, but they're actually not that great in terms of space management, in terms of heat management and everything. So very quickly, that type of design was abandoned, but the building was not destroyed. And it creates this really like mesmerizing creation, which now that it's completely renovated, so clean, shiny, is just beautiful. So you have it, that's the front. You have the back view that you can see from the Jardin des Halles, and you just have a side view. And it's really quite a very attractive and very attractive building. So the inside is even more beautiful. So that's the original fresco that is on the dome. So they did not change anything. They just renovated and just enhanced the colors. But it was really, I think, in the project or and when the town, the city of Paris handed the building to François Pinault, it was clear that he could not change anything. He could just basically make everything look more beautiful than it already was. So this is like the interior. So it's like really basically a big round building. If you've ever been to Rome, it's like the Pantheon of Rome. It really has a type of huge, this very strong sense of space and really high ceilings. You really have the feeling that you're surrounded by beauty. It's quite remarkable. So so you don't have that anymore, but when it opened, it was very, I think the project of the museum was really to create a link, an architectural and artistic link between the past and the present. So they put this this sculpture of Urs Fischer, who's a contemporary sculptor who's known for creating copies of old old statues. So this is not either like a Greek or Roman or even a Renaissance sculpture. This is a sculpture that was built in 2015. But the idea, the project of the art of the sculptor is to create something that looks like an old, I don't want to say old, but like I can't find the word, but like a more classical sculpture, just to highlight that even contemporary art can mimic and can follow the codes of classical art and also adapt it. So that moved away. Now it's in another area of the museum, and I'm just going to show you a few of the most important, like the few highlights of the collection. So I said it's a very contemporary, a little conceptual art. So you have, these are famous names, and it's really beautiful. So you have Martial Reyes, who is more like is a painter and who does more figurative art. And you have Philippe Parreno, who does what you call pieces, which are more like interactive spaces where the person enters and participates in an artistic experience. So because I saw this installation, that's not in the museum. So you basically enter. So I'm talking about this part, the Philippe Parreno installation. So you enter the room and there's a piano playing on its own, and you have little like fish balloons that are floating everywhere, and there's the sound of water dripping, and there's also, I think, somebody singing, and there are like a few other things in the corners, and you say it's so strange that it's remarkable, because you really are experiencing something completely unique that you can find nowhere else. So and you have David Hammonds that does things that look like African art, but are actually totally different. And you have Bertrand, what's his name?
Lavier.
Lavier, I was going to say Laval, who basically puts like random objects in beautiful casing in order to, here again, to show the contrast between modern life and classical life. And really to highlight how the contrast creates a lot of beauty. So if next time you're in Paris, definitely go there. It's beautiful. The building in itself is beautiful to discover. Everything, it's pristine, it's beautifully renovated. So I cannot encourage you enough to go there. So now, we've done the Collection Pinault, and we're going to walk slowly because it really is a 2-minute walk to the Église Saint-Eustache. But before, I would like to show you one of Well, I think a very popular store for anybody who is either a foodie, loves cooking, or is currently renovating its kitchen and has, let's be honest, a lot of money, because this is probably the most like, it's not insane, it's the oddest place on earth. Well, in Paris. So you enter like a very old looking building that hasn't been renovated or done. Nothing has been modernized in this building probably since the 1950s. So you really feel that it feels like an old store, like an old general store from a from the Midwest, or I can't really find the right analogy, but it really is old fashioned and a little dusty. The people are very nice, but the products, the tableware and the cooking ware is incredible. If you are really in copper pans, copper frying pans and copper equipment, then it's the place for you. They will deliver from Paris to the United States. I have a friend who comes regularly to Paris and always buys a lot of things there. And if you're like looking for like a 5-inch copper frying pan where you can fry one egg, that's the place to go, because they have any type of cooking scenarios there. They can accommodate your needs. It really is a fantastic place, and they're very nice, but you kind of have to explore and don't mind the cobwebs and the old shelves and like the not so great equipment, and you have quite an interesting experience on your hands.
Can you pronounce the name of the store for
Okay,
everybody?
so yeah, and like the fun game with my American friends is, how do you pronounce this word? So you pronounce it Deux-Îles-Laurent. So you don't pronounce the H. So I know it's a little difficult, and you just say I, Deux-Îles-Laurent. Deux-Îles-Laurent.
Merci, James.
So l'Église Saint-Eustache. L'Église Saint-Eustache is, so we're just like behind the Bourse du Commerce. So if you remember, the Bourse du Commerce is just there, basically there. So we're facing the l'Église Saint-Eustache from the gardens of Les Halles. I won't discuss Les Halles because the Les Halles is a huge topic in itself, and it's a complicated topic, and I don't have necessarily very nice things to say about Les Halles, so I didn't want to spend my presentation talking about something that I don't particularly care for. So, but I really like l'Église Saint-Eustache.
Can you just mention what Les Halles is, just really quick?
So Les Halles is really the central part of the city. Les Halles, so Halles comes from, it's like a hall. So it's how you call like a market that is covered, like a covered market. I don't know if that's a word, and that's where you had the farmers market in the 19th century until 1973. Where it was decided, because of sanitary reasons, that the open market, that basically was the source of food and the supply chain of all the restaurants in Paris, was going to move to another location, which is outside of Paris in a city called Rungis. And so you had a huge hole. Basically, they moved everything and had a hole there. And they decided to, unfortunately, build a mall, which very quickly became, which had to be renovated. So there was another project. I won't go into details, but Les Halles is basically the central part. Everybody meets up at Les Halles. And you have shopping centers. There's a shopping center, there are restaurants, there are bars, there's a lot of life there, and also all of the metros, all of the RERs that go from the suburbs to the center of Paris stop there. So basically, when you go down Saturday, it's, so there's so many people, and it's also completely pedestrian. So it's an interesting place to know. I don't really go there anymore because I don't think that it's a particularly pleasant area anymore. But l'Église Saint-Eustache is a different situation because it's, first of all, it's huge. It's a church, but it really has the size of a cathedral. So it really is extremely majestic, and it was built in 1532. So it's a fairly old Gothic church, and you really have a mix of different types of architecture. Obviously, you can see the Gothic influence, but but inside you will see also a lot of Renaissance and classical inspiration. So it really, to a certain extent, it's not as big as Notre Dame, but it really, is in many ways as prestigious and as beautiful as Notre Dame. The inside is even more so. Well, to show that it was a part of the city in the medieval times. Here you have the gardens that connect the shopping center to the Église Saint-Eustache and gardens. So young people or tourists or people who are just on their lunch break can enjoy a nice sunny day in Paris. And you really have a beautiful view of the church. It's quite a striking image because you are surrounded by fairly modern architecture, because Liane was entirely renovated a few years ago, and you really see this huge Gothic church. It really feels that it's kind of like, just like it rose out of the ground, and it really is very striking. And I love its majesty and the fact that it really connects the history of Paris to the future and the modern story of Paris. So there's maybe are there questions?
Okay. There was a question in regards to the Collection Pinault and the building. In the picture where we have the aerial view, you see like two rounded buildings on the other side of the street.
Oh, yes.
And,
I don't know. To be fair, I don't know. I was working on the presentation, and each time I was like, what are those buildings? What are they doing?
They're not part of the Collection.
No, they're not part. They were never part of I think they were part initially of an architectural project to create this kind of like round building with kind of like triangular other buildings, creating this odd shape, but they're not connected. They're not part of the same complex. So I don't know. I will tell you next time we talk to each other what I found. I think they're just basically office buildings.
Probably.
So I think so.
And then the next question is associated to the organ in the Église Saint-Eustache, which you're going to talk about. And
yeah,
I don't know if you have any information about the organist, but Karine has a little comment.
Sure. Yes, you told me that he passed away.
Yeah.
Oh, so yes. So I guess, yes, he might have passed away. So he was very famous. And but still, the organ is still there, and they still do the concerts. So it really is. He was not the only person playing the music and offering music. So he was the organist. So he would play, play during mass and do many concerts on his own. But like the church is famous for inviting a lot of very famous classical players. So you can either have religious music or sometimes just classical music. But like the acoustic in the church is wonderful, and they have a very keen selection. So, and also it's usually free or extremely affordable. That's one of the great things about Paris. It's just the number of musical opportunities that are offered, and usually not that expensive. I mean, even the opera, if you are in Paris, and we might do it another time, is really not that expensive. I mean, all things considered, compared to other cities and other opera houses. So, and they have a wonderful selection. So it really is something to take advantage of. So you can see, like, again, very large, high ceilings, beautiful arches. You have, so here the Gothic is less striking than in other Gothic churches. That's mainly because a lot of the inside was created during the Renaissance. So you have a more, let's say, a more simple, less medieval inside, and like the stained glass is a little more subdued, and everything seems to be a little more sedate, but it's still very majestic. So it really is a beautiful place. I mean, I like going into churches because you really have this incredible experience of calm and peace and peace in a church. So it really is something that you have in a very striking way at l'Église Saint-Eustache. So let's continue. So now we are leaving l'Église Saint-Eustache, and we are actually going to discover La Rue Montorgueil. So La Rue Montorgueil, it's one of the oldest and liveliest streets of Paris. So I've talked about the importance of pedestrian areas, and really the Rue Montorgueil, by being so central in the city and offering so many restaurants and stores, is really it really is a highlight of Parisian life. So and it's also, as many of these streets, really like a relic of Paris's medieval past. Nobody really knows when it was created, but it's mentioned for the first time in the 13th century. So that's a long time ago, and nobody knows where Montorgueil comes from. So So Mont is a mountain, and Orgueil is pride in French. So it's the Mount Pride. So it might have been because there was a hill called the Vicus Monti Superbi, but that's like a relic from the Roman time in Paris, when Paris was called Lutèce. But also, and that's something I discovered while I was doing the presentation, actually it's not a mount, because all of it, Paris is extremely flat except for Montmartre. So the mount was actually the accumulation of garbage from the 10th to the 14th century that actually created a hill. So it might also be an ironic name, because it's, of course, amount of garbage is everything then, a symbol of pride. So that might be it, but nobody really knows. But it's still, it's a wonderful name, Montorgueil. It really sounds great. So it was because La Rue Montorgueil goes to the north. It was the place where all the fishermen that came to Paris to sell their products, their catch. Yeah, that's it. Catch, yeah. Would come, and if you know a little bit Paris, the northern door or porte of Paris, like the northern gate, was called la porte poissonnière. Poisson is fish in French, and poissonnier is somebody who sells fish. And so La Rue Poissonnière was the door with all the people selling fish. So that's a little bit of the story of what the type of people you could see in La Rue Montorgueil during the medieval and the Renaissance and the classical times. But it was busy and noisy, but it was, of course, we're talking about time before sanitation, so it was extremely dirty and unsafe. And what also I did not know, but I've discovered, it was located near the Grande Cour des Miracles. So you probably might not know what La Grande Cour des Miracles is. La Grande Cour des Miracles was the name given to the underworld of Paris. It mimicked the French royal court. Was actually a king and a queen of La Cour des Miracles that ruled over all of the thieves, all of the murderers, all the people who were up to no good in Paris, and there are probably a lot of them. And they all kind of live together in a separate society with different levels and different ways of accessing and climbing the different stratas of the organization. I think it's stopped existing after the French Revolution when the monarchy was abolished, and that type of organization became obviously like a symbol of the Ancien Régime. So it disappeared and took another shape. I'm not saying that crime disappeared in Paris, but at least the Cour des Miracles is disappeared. And if you read a lot of 19th century novels about like the Three Musketeers, and there's another novel from Alexandre Dumas. He talks about La Cour des Miracles all the time. It's kind of like a mythical beast. They're always around, and the king and the queen are always considered to have like a lot of power, nearly as much power as the king and queen in France. So it's an interesting part of the story of the city. And here you have an illustration of Gustave Doré. Gustave Doré did a lot of illustration of medieval times when all the medieval history of Paris was being rediscovered by artists and intellectuals. So La Rue Montorgueil was extremely prevalent in art and literature. So if you read Balzac, it's mentioned very often in most of the novels of La Comédie Humaine. In Les Misérables, I think a lot of the fighting, a lot of the action happens Rue Montorgueil, and it's true that during the Commune, La Rue Montorgueil was a central part of the fighting, where the fighting took place, and a lot of the street was destroyed during the Commune. And it's also mentioned in the Vente de Paris, where he actually mentions a real hotel that was called the Compador, which was destroyed after the First World War. So now enough with story and enough of literature. Let's talk about places you can discover along La Rue Montorgueil. So first of all, L'Escargot. So L'Escargot is famous. It's first of all famous because it's the first restaurant that opened, or it's the oldest restaurant of Rue Montorgueil. There are probably restaurants opened before. So it was opened in 1832. So that's a long time ago. And of course, without any surprise, it specializes in escargot. Escargot are snails, and they are really a staple of the cuisine from the Burgundy region in Paris, which is south and a little to the east. It's an old region with a very prestigious history, and really the community from Bourgogne has always had a lot of visibility in Paris, and especially in the restaurant world. Another fantastic place is Storer. Storer is the oldest boulangerie in Paris. So it was in 1725, the princess, and I'm going to pronounce it as well as I can, Leszczyńska, who is the daughter of the King Stanislas of Poland, came to become the wife of King Louis XV. And in her entourage, in her luggage, she had her pastry chef called Nicolas Storer, who was a German-Polish pâtissier, and he came with her, and he opened his own store in 1730, and the store has existed ever since. So I don't know if you know what a baba au rhum is, a rum baba, it's basically a little patisserie which has liqueur, I think rum liqueur, as the main component, and he invented that. he invented it for the Queen Mary Leczinskaya. And I think Baba is an old Polish name. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it like that it's a reference to something Polish. The other big sale, or the big, one of the staples of Storer is their galette des rois. So I'm not going to go into details because I know what you all know what la galette des rois is, because I know Victoria has made you taste her own galette. While Storer's galette are nearly as good as Victoria's galette. I know they're very difficult to.
That's right. That's right.
To
Bar is high.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. But those are really they're fantastic. Actually, I'm working with a client who offered I get it to one of his to one of an agency that offered that the get it to the client, and the client was so happy. It's like we were offering her diamonds because she was like, oh la la. So it really is, Storer is really a symbol, like it's really, if you really want to eat a good galette, you go to Storer, and it really is good quality, good products. They're not particularly, like the galettes are expensive, but and nothing, everything else is not that expensive. It really looks like a relatively normal boulangerie. It's not, exclusive or anything. Anybody can can come in. So, and I wanted also to share with my favorite restaurant in that area called Les Crus de Bourgogne. So I don't know if you like the bistro restaurants, but I personally love them. And you have a lot of them in Paris. They come for different shapes and forms. You have the big ones, you have the small ones. This is more like the small ones, and they're usually characterized by the food that they offer. So you have like a fairly large array of dishes, usually meat-based. And they're usually run by like a family. And this, the Crus de Bourgogne, obviously a family from the Bourgogne region, I think opened it like 100 years ago, and it's the same family that runs it. I like it because it's very good, not too big, so you don't have that really like chaotic, hectic experience that you might have sometimes at big brasserie in Paris. And when it's nice in Paris, because this is la rue Bachaumont, which is perpendicular to la rue Montorgueil, is also pedestrian. So the tables are on the street, and it really is quite lovely, quite lovely. So definitely, I recommend this restaurant. So, what time is it?
You're at 43.
I'm so chatty. I'm sorry. I try not to be, but I
keep on going. Keep on
blah
going.
blah blah. Okay, so now now let's go to the Passage du Grand Cerf. So the Passage du Grand Cerf is a little outside of the Rue Montorgueil, but it really is a question of 5 minutes. So what is a passage? In Paris there are a lot of I guess shopping arcades. That's the best way to describe them. They're like closed shopping areas that usually connect one street to another. So to go through, you need to open like you were going into a building, and sometimes they're totally closed off, so you don't know they're there. And inside you have usually either one corridor or several with smallish stores or smallish restaurants, and they're something that were created in the 19th century, and the people in the 19th century were particularly fond of shopping arcades. They're probably like the proto malls of the 20th century, and all of them in Paris. Some of them are a little run down, a little sad, but a lot of them are actually very attractive, very well maintained. And one of the not the nice, like the second nicest in Paris is the Passage du Grand Cerf, which is, it's like the most striking is that it's like the narrowest and also the tallest. It goes, I think it's a 12-meter high ceiling. Is that it? 12 meter?
That
sorry, I can't, I'm trying to move, sorry. Yes, it is 12 meters high. So it's extremely high, and it's like a glass ceiling. So you have like wonderful light that comes and gives it a really like warm glow. It really is a very pleasant experience. In terms of shopping possibility opportunities, it really is an odd place. It really is typical of the global trend in Paris of oddball stores. So it's really eclectic. So if you're looking for handmade jewelry or repurposed furniture or kiting gear or Japanese lighting fixtures or vintage eyewear, which of course are all extremely important things to own, there the Passage du Grand Cerf is definitely the place for you. It really is one of a kind, but it's a nice place. It's a nice atmosphere. And I just wanted to show you that, you know, there are a lot of others, and they all have, like the pedestrian areas, they all have their own personality. So really the most beautiful, really, but I could have, no, it was a little too far away. I wanted to, but it was too far away, is La Galerie Vivienne. So it's either passage, which means passage, or galerie is like a gallery. So it's either, I guess the fancier ones are galerie, and like the more popular, the more urban ones are passage. So the Galerie Vivienne is really the most beautiful. It's also very big. There are like several streets, and you have wonderful floor designs. There's like the glass ceiling is really attractive. So you have the Passage des Panoramas, which is just a further up. So that's it. You really go there because they have incredible restaurants. You don't go there for like for the place itself. It's a little rundown, but really they have great eating opportunities. So the most exclusive is the Galerie Véro Dodard, Rue Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And if you're interested in buying Louboutin shoes, that's where the Paris Louboutin store is, on Galerie Véro Dodard. And like the busiest, and probably like the most typical of the Parisian life, is the Passage Verdot. It's a place where colleagues, where people who are working, go to eat. So from 12 to 2:30, it's extremely busy. Everything is packed, and then it's empty. So it really is probably the most typical of all the arcades I showed you, but it's in many ways not, maybe for a tourist, the least interesting. So here's the Passage du Grand Cerf. So you see really the light, there's like the color is like a yellow ochre. So when the sunlight lights up the passage, it really gives it like a glow. It really is extremely pleasant, and it's a place that you discover, and you just let yourself be surprised about the things that you might find in these stores. So that's the two entries. I think it's not the right, so you have one Rue du Sou, but I think that's the Rue Saint-Denis. So, and you have Rue du Sou. So it's really is a lovely place. So, and just one store among the vast array of strange stores in that gallery. You have this ultra hip feature that features design frames. So it's called something called new old stock. So basically they're old frames, but that have never been worn before. So you are not buying something new, but you're buying something that's never been worn. So I guess that's really something that's extremely trendy right now among the younger generations, buying something that is both old and new. So you're kind of repurposing something that already exists. So they have great frames. If you're looking for like really cool sunglasses, that's definitely the place to go, pour vos beaux yeux. And the guy is really, really nice. He's very friendly, knowledgeable. He can talk endlessly about frames. I didn't know there were so many things to say, but it's quite interesting. It's a fun place. So now let's just, so Okay, so if you, this is the passage du Grand Cerf is there. So if you kind of walk back to the Rue Montorgueil and you go to the top of la Rue Montorgueil, you arrive to like something entirely different, which is a big street called la Rue Réaumur. So la Rue Réaumur is really something like one of the big streets that were created at the end of the 19th century. I told you a little bit here and there about the transformation Paris went through at the end of the 19th century. And that transformation was, I guess, impulsed or jump-started by a man called Baron Haussmann. And he created and the most prevalent architectural style that you have in Paris, these like really very kind of like large buildings with like big entries, like with on 6 or 7 flights of stairs. That's he created. Well, but he didn't create because he was not an architect, but he is the one that really inspired that style. So and the Rue Réaumur is really striking in the way that it's remarkable in how it does not really look like a Parisian city. It's extremely straight. It goes straight ahead, and it's fairly large, and it's like lined with very imposing buildings. It looks like a street in London, and in certain angles, I'm not saying everywhere, but it nearly sometimes looks like Fifth Avenue in New York, because it really is extremely long, and you have like perfect perspective, which you nearly never have in Paris. Like streets are either short or they turn, or you never have this feeling of, oh, this street goes on forever. And you have that with the Rue Réaumur. And you have everywhere gorgeous buildings that really need to be discovered. And I just wanted to highlight 2 of them. So that's an interest. I made the presentation and I realized how ugly the picture was. I'm sorry, but that really is also, I think it really characterizes a lot of Paris. You have these awesome, gorgeous buildings. So this is like a kind of, it looks like the Bourse du Commerce, like these big rotundas with like a lot of like 19th century detail, like neoclassical, neo-Gothic, a lot of different colors. You have mosaics, you have urns, you have little details. It looks like a Greek temple, but it also looks like a church. A lot of things mishmashed together, and below that you have the Monoprix, which looks a little run down. It's been renovated since, so it's much nicer now. But the Monoprix, so you really have the contrast of how life in Paris can be really beautiful, and sometimes you're just like, you have the hard reality that sets back in when you have the Monoprix, which looks a little sad in that picture, I have to say. But so this was like, it was also the headquarters of Félix Bottin. Félix Bottin was a big it wasn't a department store, it's like a food store. It was like and they were like the first ones to exist in France. And I think they've been the brand itself disappeared, but I think they might own Monoprix now. The Félix Bottin's brand doesn't exist anymore, but it really is a remarkable building, and it was built in 1910. So really, this is nearly pastiche of a lot of you also have a lot of Art Nouveau with all the rounded details and all of nothing is, there's no right angles in this building. And I really thought it was interesting to show it to you. And another one, so it's not a great picture, again, sorry. So here, again, you have like the beauty of the building, and then like the stores, like Papeterie du Textile, which is, papeterie is like a paper store. It's like a stationery store where you can buy stationery and office supplies. So here it's very interesting because you have like neo-Gothic, which is something you don't see a lot in Paris. You have it everywhere in London. You have a lot of it in New York. It's something that was very popular, and like between the in the Victorian age, and so between 1850 and 1880, a lot of big architectural projects had that very distinctive neo-Gothic style, which you don't really see in Paris because that was not popular. Like, I guess Parisians were doing different things. They were doing the Haussmannian buildings. So it was like a completely different architectural project and ambition. But, and also what I did not know is that the Haussmannian projects had to, there was like a very strict specifications. You could not do certain details. And I guess at the death of the Baron Haussmann, some of those rules kind of were alleviated or they were less stringent. So it was like architects had greater freedom to experiment and, do things that were slightly more out there. So here you have this building that if you kind of like blot out the stores, you nearly have the feeling that you're like looking at a church with this big medieval looking clock and these really high windows, very rounded, and a lot of very different details. You have like Renaissance and classical looking windows and architectural details with these like extremely Gothic high and thin windows and this like very incredible clock, and all of that again mishmashed together to create something that is, I think, very original, and I personally love it. So I wanted to show it to you. It's a little further towards the arts et métiers, so you kind of have to walk a little bit. So, and I just wanted to finish the presentation to something that you find really on the other side of the Rue Réaumur in the Quartier du Sentier, which is a very famous neighborhood in Paris. And you have here you have so how do you say mur végétal in English?
Well, it's like a vertical
vegetable. It's a vegetable wall.
Not vegetable. It's like a vertical
garden. Oh, it's a vertical garden.
Voilà,
it's a vertical
merci.
garden. It's a vertical garden. So they've become more common, but they're definitely not a common occurrence in Paris. So they're still exceptional. And this is, of course, because it's the center of Paris, and there are like a lot of designers, a lot of fashion people, a lot of money also. This is probably the nicest. And this is probably it was obviously done like during the spring when like the wall itself is extremely lush and extremely green. It feels really like it's so lush that you feel like it's going to fall on the street because you're just wondering how all of that can actually hold vertically. But so I just wanted to, finish on that note, just to show that Paris is again a mosaic of different influences, and then by kind of following a pedestrian area, you can really experience many different things. And that's that.
Super.
So I did. So if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them if I can.
I'm checking to see if I see any hands raised. I don't know if I see any hands raised. I just wanted to tell you that there's a couple of different references online in reference to Baba. So it can mean father, but it can, from the Polish, it also means a married peasant woman.
Yes, and I think also a Baba is it's like an elder in the Polish or Slavic communities, like the woman who like the good the healer, she has all the folk tales, and you go see her when you have a problem. That's the Baba.
Okay.
It can just mean grandma.
Okay.
In Polish.
That too. Okay.
So
I had a Polish grandma.
You had a Baba.
Exactly.
And did she come with rum?
No,
No,
Manischewitz wine.
so
We've got another comment here. Question, does that copper store mean old copper or new copper?
it's yeah, those are like, sorry, everything is new. So really it is brand new, extremely high quality. It really, if you're really into cooking and obviously copper is the best type of cooking ware you can buy because it really, it conducts heat much better. It keeps, it's like all of that. You really need to go there, and like everything is high quality and it really is new. It's new. You might have, but it's not like an antique store. It looks like an antique store, believe me. You have the store in itself is antique, but all of the goods inside are in tip-top modern and really high top-notch quality.
Right,
Really.
and high top-notch prices too.
So I'm gonna say it comes with a price.
Yeah, for
Sometimes you're
sure.
just like, oh, that's expensive. Right.
James, we have a few more questions. I see that Sally's hand is raised. Sally, did you want to unmute and ask a question?
Sure.
Yes, I'm not going to really ask a question, but I am fortunate enough to have friends that live in Paris. So I have been there maybe 15 or more times.
Oh,
And one of my favorite things to do is just to wander around and find new neighborhoods. So I have taken pictures of the relevant slides and I'm going to write myself some notes of what to go see next time. So merci beaucoup.
Yeah, and just to say, this is just like a small, I just really wanted to do something, I mean, obviously because I'm so chatty and I could, so but I didn't want to do like a big walk, like a long walk. And this area where we are, le quartier du Sentier, is with la rue des Rosiers, where you have like that I showed you when I was listing the different pedestrian areas, is one of the main Jewish areas of the city. And it's probably, it's very different from the Rue de Rosiers because the Rue de Rosiers is very small and looks more typical. It has more personality, but this is like a beautiful area and it's still very much a Jewish neighborhood in Paris. And it's, we had even considered at one point talking about it, but I don't know the neighborhood that well. And it's really very interesting. So the jardin végétal, the mur végétal is just like an entry to like a really beautiful neighborhood.
Parfait.
Diane, did you have a comment or a question?
Yes, I did. Number one, James, I love the depth of your presentation, and I love your enthusiasm. I would like to inquire about the last large building you showed with the clock you like.
Yeah.
I noticed there were 2 levels in the Moselle roof and with windows open. So do they climb the stairs or have they put in an elevator, or how do you get up there?
Oh, wow. You ask a very good question. I'm not going to say there's an elevator because this is Paris and if you don't have legs, well, that's too bad for you. So, because really it is. I mean, it's
so
awesome.
That's for young people then.
Well,
I mean, there might be.
Let's be honest. Paris is really a city made for young people, but some of us are just trying to hold on.
But a lot of
but yeah, you're right. I could look into. I mean, I'm sure it has been renovated. There probably is some modern equipment inside, but
because lots of buildings were retrofitted with elevators.
Yeah, I think if people are working in it and I can look into it, yes, they have to, because that's part of French regulations that all places that offer employment need to have easy access.
I see.
Yes.
Well, it seems to be inhabited up there, so I was wondering.
Oh yeah, and you probably have chambre de bonne, because this was probably like I think it's interesting because the windows don't really look like residential. It might have always been an office building, because those would be very business, well, I mean, not business like, but professional. Like you don't really have windows like that in residential buildings. You have more like the windows that you open, I
Out.
guess, out, not these kind of like smaller smaller windows that kind of like open, like you like, it looks like there's like maybe like atelier in there, or people working.
I
They look like
see.
they look like big
Mm.
spaces, like a studio. It doesn't look really like a living quarter, but you have curtains on the fourth floor. And
Yes.
just to finish with on top, you have probably chambre de bonne. Like even places
at the
where
top, yeah.
people work, like the higher levels, like the 6th and the 7th floor, usually are offer
Yeah, for
like
the
Are they
nanny.
less expensive? Or are they less expensive?
No.
well, they're less expensive because they're tiny. Chambre de bonne is the maid. That's where the maid used to live. So it doesn't mean that a maid
Hmm.
lived there, but like that area of like a small room underneath the roof comes from a chambre de bonne. So
Mhm.
and they're usually very small with very minimal amenities.
So that
Um,
was for the staff initially to.
Yes, if you had
A maid.
family or like living there, and
Yes.
all the buildings that I've been showing you since the beginning of our presentations, these big
Mhm.
buildings always had usually they were big like bourgeois households with maids, and the maid lived on the top floor, and there's usually a
Yes.
service stairway that
Mhm.
led that connects the apartment with the chambre de bonne, and the chambre de bonne are they're like 15 square meters,
Oh
20.
my.
Some of them have been remodeled and connected, so you have bigger apartments, but
Yeah.
this is still an area with like places where a lot of students live,
Mhm.
because they
Well-
are quote unquote cheaper. But
Well,
Yeah,
thank you. That's excellent. Thank
And
you.
and each of the those larger apartments had a chambre de bonne up on
Mhm.
the top floor for
when you purchase,
staff.
when you purchase the apartment, you purchase automatically the chambre de bonne. Not anymore, because
Mm,
people
of
disconnect
course.
it and people buy them independently. But that's how the Haussmannian building was structured. You had one, like usually you had 2 apartments per floor, and you had one chambre de bonne connected to each apartment for the day.
Mm,
Our younger aunt, who is American and came to live in Paris in the late 1970s, early 80s. She went to work as an au pair for one of those bourgeois families in the 7th arrondissement, and they had a chambre de bonne on the 6th floor, and that's where she lived. So it was,
Wow.
there was a little sink. The toilet was in the hallway. If she needed to, take a bath or a shower, then she had to come down to her employers and use their bathroom.
Oh, my.
Yeah, so the type of thing that
Mhm.
you do when you're young and you're adventurous and having the time of your life in Paris. But
That's right. That's
you
right.
definitely wouldn't
Not
do
even
that
the time of
now.
your life. I mean, there's unfortunately for many people they're not that other options, and even that has become more a luxury, because those rooms are expensive. They've been,
Yeah.
a lot of them bought them and now are selling them like real apartments. So it's complicated.
Oh, my.
Et
Space,
voila.
space is an issue in Paris. Space.
Hmm.
Any other raised hand question? Speak now. Nope, I don't see anybody. So of course I want to thank James for another
Yes.
really fun
Thank you
and
very much.
educational and presentation. And I want to thank everybody who came to join us today for the presentation. Merci beaucoup. And I think James is going to be pretty busy for the next few months, but
Yes, I
we
am.
will be.
So probably we'll see each other, if you're interested, of course, maybe in May or maybe in June. So and we're still thinking of it. We might, I see Victoria, we might leave Paris for a day and go to a town outside of Paris in the suburbs.
Yeah, because I
Wonderful.
mean, there's there's always
Actually,
a lot of focus on Paris itself, but there's also, some really nice areas around.
Yes, of course,
area
of course.
That are worth.
Well, it's
checking out.
just I have a very good friend who lives in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, and Saint-Germain-en-Laye is a gorgeous city. So it's, I'm not bringing you to Sarcelles. I mean, we'll go to Saint-Germain-en-Laye. There's the castle.
We're
It
not
really
going to
is.
the projects, okay.
No, we're not going to the projects. So
Good to know.
it really is a beautiful city, and there's just a lot of interesting, and it's, it's a different, and even if it's outside of Paris, it's very much part of the Parisian experience because most of the people don't live in Paris anymore. They commute from the outside to the inside. So it's I think it's going to give it's the opportunity to give you like another angle in the French experience, the Parisian experience.
Mhm.
And it really is a beautiful place. And she has a great
Yeah.
life. So,
All right, mesdames et messieurs, and I wish you a very nice
à la
weekend.
prochaine.
Merci
Stay warm.
beaucoup.
It's
Merci
cold in
beaucoup.
Tucson this weekend,
It's
so
cold in Paris too. It's freezing in Paris.
oh, it was freezing in Tucson this morning. Wow.
It's cold everywhere.
Et
Merci
voilà.
beaucoup, James.
Merci à tout le
Merci
monde.
beaucoup, Victoria.
Ah, merci à toi. Ok,
Ça
tout
fait
le monde.
plaisir.
À la prochaine.
À la prochaine,
Ok,
tout le
à la
monde.
prochaine.
Au revoir. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Ciao, ciao.